Welcome back. Some of you might be surprised to know that the government of Canada spends $43 billion a year in public service wages, which is its largest expenditure. But could Canadians get better value for their investment? Treasury Board President Tony Clement joins us now with more right here in the studio in Toronto. Now, Tony, a lot of interesting aspects. We were talking about this while we were in the break, sick days. And here in Ontario, obviously, teachers' unions, we've heard 120 days at 90% pay. It's not that different necessarily when we're talking with the feds.
Right now, the average federal public servant has available to him or her 15 bank sick days per year. The usage is quite interesting, though. You've got on average, about 18.2 sick days being used a year. When you add in weekends, it's almost a month a year for the average federal employee. That compares to about 6.7 days per year in the private sector, and it's also well above other public sectors in the country as well. So those are some of the facts. We dug a little bit deeper as well and found that in the last year before retirement, the average public servant uses about 44 sick days in a year, in that last year. Now, it might be that they're sicker, but I also have to believe that people wanted to use up their banked sick days, or some did. To the extent that that's happening, I think we've got to have a better system. The system has got to be there. If you're sick, it's got to be there for you. And we've got to have an active case management system so that if you're sick, we make sure you're taking your meds, make sure you're doing the rehab so you can get back to your work. That's what we should be doing as an employer.
Okay. And, how do you put controls in place? I know in the private sector, we have 8 sick days. And then, of course, if somebody really is sick, it can be extended to more. You have to have proof that you were sick by going to a doctor, or if you're 3 days or more. Does it work the same way in the public sector?
It should. Don't forget that right now we have a system in place that actually was created in 1970. So it doesn't have those aspects to it that one would normally associate with a modern workplace. In fact, sick days as a concept was created in 1923. So we really have to modernize this for the 21st century. And yet part of it is this active case management, which people in the private sector and in other public sectors are used to. What it means is the insurer, if you're off, over a certain number of days, they're going to phone. How are the meds working? Are they working? Do you need other prescriptions? Or if you're doing rehab, how's the rehab going? Are you getting the rehab you need, or do you need something else? How can we get you back to your job? That should be what we do as a compassionate employer, but also it's also in the best interest of the taxpayer, obviously, as well.
And especially when you're talking about $48 billion, that's the investment into the sector itself.
43, yeah.
Oh, 43.
Yeah.
43 billion. So how much does this cost us, though, if these 6 days are actually being abused? Or in the long run, are we paying for people not to work just because they don't want to work?
Yeah, I don't have an exact dollar figure for you, but let's put it in a more general way. It costs us in terms of productivity. It costs us in terms of morale. Look, if you're a diligent public sector employee, and there are many of those in the system, they want to work hard, they want to advance their career, they want to do well for Canada. But if the person at the workstation beside you is abusing the system, it really affects your morale, and it affects the morale of the people around you. So we want to have rules in place that are there for people who, when they are sick, they can get better quicker, get back to their workplace. And at the same time, if there are abusers in the system, and undoubtedly there are, that we can identify those people earlier and deal with that situation.
I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times. I sure have. Well, I got a cushy government job.
Well, right. And look, I'm not saying that that's everybody's attitude, but to the extent that it's out there, we have a responsibility as a responsible employer, responsible to the taxpayer, to root that kind of mentality out there. That's similar to what I announced 3 weeks ago, where lo and behold, we want to have a system in place so that every employee knows what the objectives of their job is. And has routine evaluations on whether they are up to their performance standards. And I think that's your viewers would probably be shocked that isn't in place right now, but it is not uniformly in place. And so, again, I think that's good for the taxpayer, but it's also good for the public servant who might be working hard, and the person at the workstation next to them is, if they're surfing the net 7 or 8 hours a day, that not doing their job, that has an impact on morale more generally.
And Tony, very quickly, in the long run, really what that can do is eliminate duplicate work.
Right. So, every person who is taking advantage of the sick leave system for not pure purposes, most of those people, if it is longer term, have to be replaced by somebody else. And so that is a cost to the system as well. I think we should be a compassionate employer. The current system, no one really checks in on these people to see how they're doing. They're kind of lost to the system. And I don't think that's right either. I think that we want people to be well in the workplace. And if no one cares whether you're sick or well, whether the meds are working or whether the rehab is working, I don't think that that's right either. So I think from a number of different vantage points, we got to modernize the system. We got to put it into the 21st century. We got to have more accountability in the system. And I think that'll be good for the taxpayer and good for the employee.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.